It is my privilege that we can continue our seminar about the law of life, and we want to look in this lecture to the way out of our situation. We all have seen that disease must have a certain cause. If it does not have a certain cause, we can never remove it. And unfortunately, what we have today in science is a knowledge about the human being and a knowledge how things work. So that's why disease is just spreading and growing. And we try to fix things without understanding exactly what we do. That's why we have considered to look to the human being. We must know that the human being is a soul who has two components. He has the brain with all the organs of the body and the spirit by which he thinks and evaluates. But both are empty vessels, so to say. They need power. So here we have the needs for chemistry in the brain, and the spirit needs love in order to make that electrical power and that input so that everything in the human body could work. So the question just is, what kind of love? It was one of the beautiful things that I could discover in my studies, that as all things in the human body are set. You know, you're set for the oxygen, for the temperature, for all balances of all chemicals that run to our body. So also the way we have to think in order to make that correct electrical input is set. That's why I could observe and give a definition of love from what the body shows. Because if we would ask anyone what is his definition of love, everyone would come to different conclusion, because it is a subjective thing. But if you can measure a subjective element with a physical, then you can know for sure what kind of love is needed. And this was the beautiful thing, that you can see on the body what the spirit should exercise for a love in order to make the right electrical input. So here is the definition of love that I could see from what the brain needs, what the body needs as electrical input. Because if our decisions are that what makes the input and runs the body, then it must run it with the power that is set and is not changeable for that. So love is as infinite as we know it can be, and it might have more things to it, but I always try to get that which is at the bottom of it. And I found two roots of that, what I call the definition of love. The first is a maximum interest for the other. That does sound like love, yes? To have a maximum interest for the other, even to give your life for him. That is one part of love. Now, what we human try to exercise among us is something that is not the same, because the human love, as it is a dependency from others, has not an interest for the other, but in the other. So love has an interest for the other, but human love has an interest in the other. And that makes all the difference in life. Because if a parent would have a love for the child, then it would act correctly. But since the parents have an interest in the child, or in their partner, or in their family, or in their parents, whoever it is, they must dominate, they must force, they must condition what they want. So you see a little difference in the definition, and it all gets the wrong way. So love is not an interest in the other, because then it's for you. It's an interest for the other. And that can be checked and seen by the other side or other root of love that says love gives 100% freedom for the other. That means it respects the other 100%, which is humanly not possible if you have an interest in the other. But of course you could lose your interest in the other because it doesn't taste so good, and then you try to become indifferent or to avoid the contact. Now, indifference would not make us sick, but it is not love. Love has a maximum interest for the other, while at the same time gives total freedom to the other. And when I came to understand this definition of love, I was very happy because it suits exactly the need for my spirit. Would you not like to have a companion, a partner, whoever is around you? Would you not like to have a society in which everyone would have interest for the other, but would give always 100% freedom and respect to the other? What a world would that be, especially as we see in this common situation that we have, that no one can give freedom for the other if the other is a danger for himself. So love, as I could see it from the body, is exactly that what suits us. We love to have an environment that has maximum interest for each other, but at the same time does not interfere in the will and in the actions of the other. That's, I think, everyone likes that definition. And I didn't find a patient that said, oh no, I don't like that. No, we all like it because it's that what we were made for. So there is something in love that is not possible, no compulsion for the good. There's no force in love. There is no conditioning in love. The only thing I found out that is at the root of every disease, but also of every conflict among us as intelligent beings, is that we want to force the good on others. I found this to be the deepest and lowest evil, or the greatest evil, to say so, because it looks so good. It looks so good for the common good to compel others to do what you want. It is exactly opposite of everything that is set in us. Force or compulsion for the good is not in love. It's the opposite of love. You cannot bring it together. That's why all problems and also diseases arise from we all want the good, but we want it by force. Now, what would be the condition in order that I should exercise this kind of love towards my fellow people? To have a love for the other and at the same time give freedom and respect the other means that you must be completely independent on the person you give that love. Because if you need that person for yourself, or that person can give you something or can steal you something away, then of course you are not able to exercise that love. This kind of love that the spirit must exercise in order to put the brain into the right function is a love that must be given without a wanting something back, or having an interest for oneself. That's why I always doubted that there could be a God, but since I saw the definition of love and a human being having a spirit, I came to the clear conclusion there must be a God, because only He can be that love, because only He is independent. You see, if someone would be dependent on us, if God would be dependent on us, He could not love us. He only could use us. And in the medical world, in our relationship world, we always find the idea of being used. Once I had a patient, a lady, who complained because her husband does not love her as she would like it. And one of the issues that she had was, he just uses me for his own pleasure. Now, you see, love, you cannot use someone who loves because he's independent. But she, being dependent on her husband, feels herself used by him. Like, it's one of those thoughts that is a very devastating thought, to believe that someone uses you. It's a destroying thought. Why is it a destroying thought? Because it's a untrue thought, because no one can use you, because you don't belong to yourself, and whatever you give, you don't give it from yourself. But as we don't know the law, we are just, how can I say, in confusion. That's why we remember the universe was created by a God that is love, and we can prove that He's love by the law He put in the whole universe. That means everything is a channel. Everything is dependent for existing and for function from an intake, from a power outside of them. Nothing can be independent. Only God is independent. But the other side, that is the beautiful side of the law, is that nothing can do anything for itself. We have to give that what we take. Everything serves a purpose. And if we understand that, life becomes another way to live. Because then we know, I am here in order to give. And if my husband finds pleasure on me, then I'm happy, because how much do I give from myself? Nothing. But we are so twisted. Even the religious people who call themselves Christians or whatever they are in their religion, they want to be loving. But if you want to be loving, why would you expect from the other to love you? Why would you be there and just await when your husband comes home to see if he brings you some flowers or if he gives you attention? Why are you just in that mode of expectation and not in the mode of giving? And I believe that's the cause why we are not connected to the source. So let's repeat. Everyone is built with a spirit and a body. And we know the body needs chemistry. That's why it's bound to nature. And originally the spirit had to be bound to God in trust. Then the electrical power would have been perfect and everything would work well. Same thing in the child. If the child comes out of the mother's womb, then it binds the body to nature. And by education, by the age of 12, the child should be not having any umbilical cord here, but having its umbilical cord in God, who is bigger than his mom and has that what the child and the growing up person needs. And then everything would work well in the body of the child. So that is the original settings as God created man. But unfortunately, we have seen that in our subconscious, we all have a wrong idea about ourselves. We believe we're gods. And as I believe I'm a god, then of course, the only issue that I have in life is God. And if I'm a god, then I must, of course, dominate the humans and the animals and everything that is under me. That's why this terrible identity that we have puts its roots in that where you see your origin. So that's why the most people have a problem with their parents, because they see their origin in their parents. But do we really come from our parents or just through our parents? So we must dominate those who we think they're ours, and that starts with parents and then with all other relationships we have, including the animals. And we must be in competition because they could take us something away from us. Because there is a fight only among those who believe they're gods. And unfortunately, the child is born the same way. And as the child is born the same way, it also is separated from God and must trust her mother and her father. And is very angry when mother and father don't do what it expects. You see, the dependency of the child, it's very beautiful to be seen in the child on its parents, is until a certain age physiological. But it should be educated so that it should connect as it connects when it comes out of the mother's womb to nature, which is bigger than everything, and then it should bound to God, which is also bigger than any human spirit. Now, when I saw that we all have the same common problem, I was thinking, how did this happen? How did it come that we all, by no exceptions, deal with the same issue, deal with the same problem? Doesn't matter what the thing is that it triggers, but the way of thinking, the way of reacting to the things is always identical in the human beings. I ask myself, where does this originate? So how did we come to have this identity? How did we come to believe something about us that is not the truth? How does that every human being from its birth, you can see it is possessive, everything is his, and it dominates, it wants to rule immediately. If this lie would not exist in us, then everything would be perfect in our relationship, because then we would live in your truth. So how did we come to have all this bad idea about ourselves in ourselves? That's why we have to look a little bit to the law of inheritance. And the law of inheritance is that what proves a common origin. See, where do we come from? If we would have no law of heredity, then we could say, well, everyone comes from somewhere, different places. But as we know and look to the law of inheritance, we see that we all come from the same origin. So that's why I put my question, where do all humans on this earth come from? Do they come from different directions? Or do they come from one root? What does the law say? And we all know by the law that life can only occur or multiply from life itself. So you cannot take a dead thing and make a living out of it. If there is no life in it, nothing happens. That's why we all come from living. Our parents were alive when they conceived us. They were not dead. Because from a dead person, no one can become life. So, only from a living being, another living being can come out. That is the law of heredity, of inheritance. And we must see that there are other proofs that we all must have the same common origin, and that is we are one species. Even though some are tall, are smaller, and some are bigger, and some are thinner, and some have different skin colors, it's still one species. We have an identical structure, as we have seen. I have traveled all over in this world, and I could not see that one human being had another structure than the other one. So we must all come from the same origin. We have identical functions. How does? Yeah, because we come from the same origin. We have identical basic needs. So no one can say, well, I am here on earth and I can dispense of oxygen. I don't need oxygen. We all have the same basic needs. And we all have the same wrong identity. We all believe something about ourselves that cannot and is not the truth. So where do we come from? So we look to all humanity and we must see that they all come from one origin. Out of one life, all billions of individual humans come. That's the law of inheritance. And how did it work? Now, we can see this all over the earth because it's one way of how God made things to function on the earth. So he created one being, Adam, as we have seen, and he had the right identity, so he was connected to God because there was no life without a spiritual connection to God. And this is how God creates everything on this earth. He created one, and out of that, all others should multiply. That's why we have multiplication. If each one would come out of a different way, then we would not be able to multiply. So he creates a being that is supposed to multiply without ever ending. That's the pattern of every created thing. Look to it. And especially of everything that we see alive. Now, out of Adam, God created Eve. But Eve was not taken from the dust of the earth, and he did not breathe her any breath of life in her nostrils. She was taken from a living being. So she was an identical copy of Adam. Now, with a little bit different outside, but she was identical, 100% Adam. So every descendant that would have been on earth would just be the descendant of Adam's life. Because one life, and all that come out of that, every individual should live forever. So one life, billions of individuals. That's most important to understand. So where do I come from and where do you come from? Sometimes I ask this my patients, when did they start their life? And then some say, well, in the moment of conception. Well, yes, in the moment of conception, you as an individual started. But your life started here. Because all we are is just the multiplication of that one life. Look outside to the trees, to the grass. Where did it come from? Where does it come from? It all comes as a multiplication, and it still works the same. So this is a concept that the law of heredity proves. There's nothing that we can question on this. There must be one out of which every other comes out. And that first one, God created. He also made the second one as a part of it, so that then together they should multiply forever. And everything would have been well if Adam and Eve would have not been tempted to believe they might become gods. And they failed. It's a mystery how they could think they could become gods. And so Adam and Eve separated themselves from God, because you cannot be one with God, you cannot live from His love when you think you are independent and live from yourself. But at the same time, they had to bind themselves to someone else, because the spirit cannot exist by itself. That's why they die. And so all descendants of Adam are bound to humans through this wrong identity. They all come and believe they're gods, so that's why they bind to humans and want something from humans and dominate them. That's why every human being is dead from his birth. We only live because God had found a way out of our situation. If there would be no way out, why would life be worth living? You see, when I was more younger and in my age where I saw that I'm a being that can die, it really struck me, the idea that I might pass away. And so I came into my period of anxiety and great fear. And then I was afraid that I suddenly could lose my life by this disease, especially by heart failure, anything that was around my heart. And back then I said to myself, I was about 26 or 7 years, I said, if I just reach the age of 60, I would lose every fear, because if I have reached the age of 60, now from here on I can live freely, I have nothing anymore to lose. Sometimes I'm laughing about how I was thinking back then, but it was somehow I wanted to have that assurance, at least I should live 60 years. But friends, I'm now almost 60, I'm 57 in a few days. Do I really think that I reached the goal of my life? I reached it. I could say now I can pass away, because no. There is in me something, and I believe it's in you as well. If life has a purpose, then you want to live that purpose eternally. You don't want to quit at any moment, because it makes pleasure to live and fulfill the purpose why you were created. So, what is 57 years? It's nothing. That's why, even if we would live 1,000 years as a dead life, in which you only fight with each other, in which everyone searches to reach his goals by what others are doing, who is always focused, oh, does he do that right, or does she do that right, and did she not hurt my feelings or whatever? What would that be for a life? I would not think it's worth it. That's why we only live it to escape out of it. But how shall that happen? So we must understand the way the Spirit works. I repeat that once again. We all are born, I would say, with a stone, a heavy stone, maybe 2 tons, or, That stone is nothing else than this deception that we all believe that we are gods, we're higher beings. Now, if this stone must be removed from our hearts, must be removed from our spirit in order to live free again. As long as this stone is there, we are limited beings. The spirit was made, if you would, feed from God to feed eternally. But as the now thinks he's God, he's separated from God, so all his knowledge and everything he can feed from is from people the same like him. So that's a great limitation. And if we don't get rid of this, it will kill us finally. Because there is no way out for a human that believes he's a God to ever will be able to exercise love and not destroy himself or others. That's why the question is, how can we get rid of this? It's inside us, and I compare it with a heavy stone, a heavy rock that you cannot move. Now, if you cannot move it, can someone else move it? By example, can God move it, or can God take it out? Now the question is no. Why not? Because God has no access to a spirit. He created this spirit in his likeness. That means as he governs himself from inside, and he is the source of everything, of course he must not take anything because he's the wellspring, but he conducts himself from inside. So he made the spirit as an entity to always work like he works, except the difference that every created spirit must take its needs from outside. It cannot have a well in itself, but it still works just from inside out. We have seen that before, and I repeat it once again because it's a detail that we should never forget. No one can rule my life, neither yours. No one can make you a subject of himself, except you do it yourself. No one. That's why we prove that if we don't agree to be the subject of another one, we rather die. Because the spirit must himself from inside obey in order to be subjected. And he can only be subjected if the other person has its needs. But if I don't need anything from the other ones, because I have and fulfill my needs from God, then I will never be subject to any human being. I think that sounds good. I mean, I love to not be dependent on spiritual level from those around me. I rather want to give them something than to expect something from them for me. So here we must understand the function of a spirit. Only the spirit can from inside remove the stone. So now that we have it all, and it's impossible for us to remove it, is there a way out to still remove it if even God cannot do it? Because he has no access. He did not create a spirit that later on he should say, well, I made a mistake, I break him and repair him. No. When he once created something, it remains like that. As his laws are unchangeable, so his being is unchangeable. So God found a way out. And the only way out was to become that spirit, in order by his power from inside out remove the issue. That's why we have that what we call the incarnation of Jesus. Now, he was divine from his origin, and a God can never become a human. That should be known. The law does not admit that at any time a cause can become an effect. A cause makes the effect, but the cause is never the effect. So the one that writes a book, the book cannot be the writer of the book, neither the writer can be the book. The one that makes a device, a computer, is not the computer, and the computer is not the one that was made. So that's why God cannot become a human. and a human cannot become a God. But there was one way, and it's mostly not understood. God could take the human on himself. Of course, he had to reduce some of his attributes in order to do that, but he could take the human upon himself like a coat, like a garment. And this is what happened when we speak about Christ's incarnation. So his divinity is not cannot be removed, but he can put the human being around himself. Why? Now this human being that Christ took upon himself must come by the law of heredity from two parents, must have a father and a mother, because every human being is half of his mother and half of his father. So Jesus' humanity could not come from himself, it has to come exactly like we are coming from two different parents. And Jesus had God as his father and Mary as his mother. So we know that by the law, 50% of the spirit that the human Christ had was from his father, and 50% body was from his father as well. So half of it. And Jesus was half of the spirit from mother and half of the body from mother. We know that out of a woman we can never make a male, because she does not have the chromosomes that are needed in order to become a male. That's why Jesus was conceived by the Holy Spirit in the womb of Mary. And I believe it's nothing difficult for God to make half of a spirit and to give a part of the spirit of a man and the other part of genes. That's nothing that God cannot do. But he had to come into this human life. For what purpose? That's why he was the Son of God as a human and the Son of Man, like we are called, I'm the son of my mother and I'm the son of my father. So that's how Jesus was called the Son of Man and the Son of God. So from his Father, in his spirit, he inherited the right identity. Now, in the body, there is no sin. In the genes, there is nothing evil. In the physical world, evil does not exist. It is just that it breaks. It is because it is governed by the Spirit. And if the Spirit has an evil thing in it, then it might break that, or should not be broken. So in the body, we don't have issues. The body is just the result of what we think and what the Spirit does. So here, Jesus inherits a clear identity from his Father. That's why he is connected to him at the moment of conception. But he must inherit from his mother Mary the wrong idea as being a God, as a human. This was the only way God could come and help remove out of the human spirit the evil thought. That's why Christ had to fight a battle to never listen to the idea that he's a God. All his temptations, if you look to, were to prove his divinity. Because now if you're a human and you have the idea that you're a God, and in the back you're a God, then if someone comes and tempts you and says, hey, you need some food, why not make out of these stones bread? You might say, yes, that's a good idea. But the moment you do it, you break the law, because in that moment it's about yourself. There is no human being that can provide for his needs. Those are God's sphere of action. The oxygen, he must provide. I'm only breathing it. The water, he must provide. I only drink it. The food, he must provide. I only use it. But in the moment he's a God, why would he need food? So you understand the difficulty in the temptations of Jesus, he was always tempted to do something out of his divine power. But he never did. He conquered this in himself. He never listened to the idea that he's a God, but lived, putting aside that divinity, so to say, not functioning, in order to live as a human. That's why he answered the tempter and says, man does not live by bread alone. So he knew his life was not dependent on that food alone, because of whom he trusts his life. But he came and took about himself this human being in order to remove the stone that we cannot remove it, you and I cannot remove it, without having a divine power. So he took the power from his Father in order to conquer that. And on the cross, before he died, you might know the story, if not, you read it in the Bible. There was a battle in which he was clouded in darkness. And that battle, something happened. And at the final hour of that battle, Jesus cried, "It is finished." And the question is, what did he cry that it's finished? What was it that he finished? Christians, most of them don't know that when he cried, "It is finished," the old stone, the idea that he's a God, was removed from his spirit. So now he was a spirit that had no heredity anymore from his mother. That is our only problem. So he had first to remove that. But now he had also to destroy the whole human being. So the whole human must die. Now God could not kill him because he never sinned. No one could kill him. That's why Jesus gave his life. Because this life of Adam that was destroyed by this nature of believing you're someone that you're not, had to be put to death, because it could not come back to God again. The Bible says flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God. That's why he had to put that aside, but not in order to put it aside forever. He just died in order to, out of the old, he should make a new one. But that new life that came out of the grave was a total new human being. He now had no parts of Adam or Eve. He was 100% the child of God. The Bible says in Psalm 2, "This day I have begotten thee." Now that's the day when he was resurrected, because that's the day the new human being came out of the grave. He is now 100% Son of God. He doesn't have two parents. He's a new creature. And this new creature is that what the Bible calls the second Adam. And something that is most marvelous is that this connection between the 100% human and the divine Jesus is now inseparable. Before the cross, Christ could have taken off his garments of humanity and could go back and leave the human race. But after he came out of the grave, he was now connected in an inseparable way to the human being. This is why the Bible says, "So loved God the world that he gave his only begotten Son," because now Jesus' divinity will be stay for all eternity as the one that is connected and has as a code the human being. In himself, the unity between the human and the divine was made. And that's why sin, and sin is the separation from God, will never be possible again. Because everyone who is in Christ is a new creature and is inseparable bound to God, because he does this binding in himself. And so this is our inheritance that he gave us. This is our salvation. And this is also our righteousness. So, wrapping all things together, Adam and Eve bound themselves to the devil, and their life was lost. But all their descendants come and are also bound there. And this life could not be saved again. This life, if it remains like this, it is a dead life. But God did not want to lose any individual of this life. That's why he sent his son. He came into this life. Yes, he had to have the half of it. He was just 50% of Adam, not 100%. He had to be bound to his father in order to remove that what he inherited from his mother. And he removed that on the cross. And then he killed the whole being in order to create at the resurrection a total new life. And this is the escape for us. I am born in this life like you and everyone else on this earth. By birth, death is already written on our foreheads. Because this life of Adam is a dead life. It can never come back to connect to God again. Out of it, there can nothing be done that is good. That's why this life is a lost life. And the only way for me and you is to escape this life and to come into this one. We must exchange our identity. We must come back to the truth, to know who we are. If not, there is never a way to come out of this. You see, I had a patient. She was at the end of her 50s, and she had cancer in a almost final state. And I was doing some meetings around her home, and she got an invitation, and so she asked me to come to visit her. And I went, and I took her physical examination, and it didn't look well. And then I asked her stories. And she had a terrible story. She was left by her parents at the age of 3 years. At an age of 12, if I remember well, she was abused sexually by the brother of her girlfriend. At the age of 18, she marries. To find out later that her husband is a pedophile, that he abused their 2 or 3 sons they got. I don't know, remember exactly the number of sons she had. And she found out just a few years before, when her son died on cancer, that his father has abused him. So she divorced the father of this when he knew what has happened. But did that solve her issue? She has a loss of her son. She has a loss of her husband. She has a loss of the parents at the age of 3 because they reject her. She loses her, you could say, what she might mean dignity by being sexually abused, even though that's not the truth, but we believe that. So she is in a total mental, terrible state. She has a lot of people who owe her something. First the parents, then the brother of her girlfriend, then her husband, and then her son who passed away. And now what shall she do? The cancer proves that she cannot handle the unrighteousness that was done to her. We have a need for righteousness, an absolute need for righteousness. If we would consider ourselves to be creatures of God, like Jesus considered himself, then every unrighteousness that would be done unto us, we would consider the same, like Jesus said, they don't crucify me, they crucify you. And he said, Father, forgive them what they do. Because if he would have taken that personally, he would have said, oh, I must forgive these people because they do it unto me. No. In his whole life, Jesus was so in the truth that whatever they did to him, they persecuted him, they judged him, they accused him. Several times they wanted to kill him. Several times. Even though he never did anything bad. But he never thought they would do it to himself. This also he taught his disciples. He said, whatever is done unto you, don't consider it personal. But that's impossible. As long as the identity is that I'm a God, I must take everything personal. And I tell it from my own experience, and I believe you can tell it from your experience as well. You cannot handle unrighteousness that is done unto you. Whatever it is, that unrighteousness, that loss that is made unto you is unrighteous. And you cannot handle it as long as you believe it done on you. You are the one that has the loss. It's impossible. So here, this lady destroys herself because she's in a situation where righteousness cannot be done unto her. Her parents cannot pay what she had done. The brother of her girlfriend cannot pay. The husband cannot pay. The boy cannot be made life again. So what remains to her? Her need for righteousness that is set in her spirit must be fulfilled. She cannot say, no, I don't need that to be fulfilled. No, it must be fulfilled. There is no way out. If someone did something to us, as long as we believe it is done unto me personally, we must destroy ourselves. That individual must do himself harm. Disease is a self-made thing because we believe others has done something wrong to us. So the only way out for this lady and for everyone else is to understand that it was not done unto her. She must have a new identity in which she knows, I'm a creature of God, I'm a child of God, and everything that is done unto me is done unto Him. And if it's done unto Him, He will take care for my need of justice. That is, if I am not personally injured, then I don't need to take care to satisfy that need. Because it's not my need that is taken away. But if I think I'm a God, then it's my need that is taken away, and that cannot stay like that. And in this way, I suggested to her to let go of all these debtors that she has. But how can she do that? The only way to let go of that what others have done unto us is to understand the truth. They did not do it to us. But in order to understand that truth, we must come into this life to have that identity in which we know who we really are. then we are free. Then we are free. How did I come from this life into this? That I want to share with you in my next presentation as we come then to a close to the seminar, to understand what really matters in life and where disease is coming from. So I'm looking forward to see you and to share my story of exchanging my life